Also, at that time, people didn't have bathtubs. Once a week, they would go to a public bath.
You're really getting a
See,
story.
everybody did that. But we had a bathtub because we had the doctor.
Right.
See, and we were living power floor and basement. See what I mean? In a brownstone house.
And you had a telephone.
So I used to get all the children and let them take the baths in our house. We had a piano. We had a piano. Don't forget, maybe they paid 50 cents a week, but we had a piano. And Ray took piano lessons. Then when Helen got a little older, she took piano lessons, then I took piano lessons. Did play, and Helen played very well. See, Helen was 26, you know who Helen is, Lillian's mother. See, she died in the flu. She was only sick 2 days.
2 days. Oh. I mean, I've heard the story.
Lillian was 18 months old, and Helen was in the 8th month with a second child. Then we called Dave. Dave came up, and it looked slim. They had a doctor, the doctor who had been coming in. By Monday, they said no hope, and by Tuesday, she was gone.
What year was this?
1918.
1918.
That was a big epidemic.
October 31st,
I'll
1918.
tell you a little story pertaining with 1918. I had an aunt, and in 1918 she got the flu, and she was destitute, so they took her to Welfare Island. That's a city hospital. And people died around her like flies, and she lived through it. She died about 2 months ago at 104.
My
grandmother. My grandmother.
See, Henry was working, but Henry never made very much of a success with the work. He was in tailoring, but it was a job that, I mean, he just, like you're a presser, you remain a presser. You're a button maker, you remain a button maker. Do you see? It isn't like an engineering where you can wake up. So his job was mediocre. Ray was getting along. Everything seemed to be all right. But Florrie, I told you, was born. Then Sydney. And Sydney was 2 years old when Danny was born. And Danny was 2 weeks old when Sydney went to convulsions. Ray was alone. It was July. See, Danny was born July 15th, so this was about the 30th of July or 31st of July. And Ray was in the building alone. She starts screaming because she sees a dead all of a sudden. And here Florrie is 4 years old, and Danny's 2 weeks old, and here's Sydney 2 years old, laying there like dead. So she started screaming, and nobody could hear her because it was noontime. Finally, somebody did hear and came in, whatever it was, so the scare caused her to have a nervous breakdown. So they called him, and he took care of her, and he slapped her to get her out of, you know, like
hysteria.
But he said the only thing that will help her, for her to go in business, if she'll go into a business, and if she'll be occupied, she may get around and wake off the scare. So my parents, they, with Ray, decided they will open a store for Ray because Ray had never gone to work. Helen had never gone to work. See, I was in high school, at Morris High School. So they decided they'll open a trimming store because my mother's work was handling silks and satins and laces and buttons and so on. Henry, her husband, liked the idea very much. He gave up working and he'll help, but he liked baseball and he liked mid-afternoon sports. So, and he had, Ray was a very independent person, and my parents were there, my mother and father. I was in high school, see, I was excused and so. But they handled the business, and that helped Ray. Danny grew up. Sydney was smart. Sydney, from the Danny because Danny was neglected. First of all, he was neglected because Ray was in business. She used to hire girls, you know, to help in the house or help with Danny. But Danny really was neglected because of the business and because of Ray being busy and because he couldn't come near Sydney in intelligence, you see. Now, the business, after a while, was good. And so good that they decided that they'll open a store for Ray. See? So Ray opened a store on 207th Street, near Broadway. So she ran that store, and my parents ran the one on 180th. She worked up the business beautifully. But she was so good, and she had a woman who helped. You know, she hired somebody who was so good that Henry didn't have to be there. See? So Henry took a walk.
He went to the baseball game. He went to the baseball
Or
game.
he would go to the park. He didn't gamble. Henry was not a gambler. He was not a runaround. He was a perfectly wonderful human being, but he felt superfluous. That's all. He would make signs. For instance, if they sold then black material that you would make like I'm wearing a gamp now, see? So we would take a bolt of material, which they do today too, and cut it in half. Half they would mark $1.79 a yard, and the other half $2.79 a yard. And that he was good. See, the people preferred the $2.79. The gloss was better or something.
Did Henry participate in the bringing up of the children? Let me write that down.
Okay.
Did Henry help?
No. The only one he helped was Danny. He would take Danny along when he went to the ball game. See, not Sidney. Sidney was studious. Sidney was on his own. Sidney was okay, but he just take Danny along. So Ray worked up the business so well that she decided to open another one because all the wealthier people were moving up to the concourse. The Grand Concourse was wonderful. So she opened another store on 161st Street near Jerome Avenue. And that was a marvelous store. She figured that she'll take care of one, Henry the other. But Henry disappeared because Ray was so good that whoever she hired for help used to run the business. You know what I mean? He came an automobile. They were able to have a car. See, cars became available. Automobiles.
Right.
Business was very nice, but very good. They made lampshades. They made bedspreads. They used a lot of lace. Insights was wonderful. Everything was wonderful. My parents were still in
their shop.
they're out of the picture. See, they were running their store. And Ray was doing very well with these two stores. See, between the lampshades and the lace and the various things, they were really set. So Sidney Henry bought a car as soon as they became popular. Harry was in the army. My brother Harry was in the army. He was in France. He
In the
was
First
there.
World War?
Yeah,
First World War.
That's David Rosner's.
Brother.
Father. Who else? David and
I know Harry.
yes, David.
David and Irene.
The other one.
No, Irene is the granddaughter. Lillian, right.
Anyway,
The granddaughter.
David Rosner's father.
Right.
He was in the army and he was gassed and he was in France and he was in the hospital there for 11 months. See, now, during the time that he was there, this flu epidemic took place here. So Helen died while he's
18.
in France. So you can imagine the effect it had on my parents.
Oh, yeah.
See, so we're very, very heartbroken. Okay. Well, they finally had to accept, it was inevitable. Harry came back, and Harry has no profession, because when he was 18, he was taken into the army. So he came back with nothing, and he had the cough. He came back with this cough, see, from the gas. So, well, what are you going to do with him? He has no profession. Took him into the store.
Right.
So he remained in the store with my parents. And here I am absolved. Because when I graduated from high school, I had to cry and beg my parents to let me go to work because a job was handed to me on a platter. So Harry developed his ability to do things in the store, and he became so good that between Ray and my parents, they decided to open a store for him, also the same kind of store. So that's on 231st Street in Broadway. In order to wake up his business, I used to go up there and teach knitting and crocheting and embroidery, see, several times a week. When he was married a year, David was born. Now that your mother and dad were married, we were coming from New York to the wedding, and Florrie Grudenchik had her new baby, which was evidently Betty. See, and the father, Henry Chrysler used to drive a taxi at that time because he had a heart attack and he hadn't been working, so he was able to get a taxi to drive, and he was taking up. We were going up, and we were on the parkway when he had a flat tire, and Florrie had a little baby in her arms. So somebody and I, Kritzler also, I forget her first name. Anyway, she and I got out to hitch a ride, to summer ride, and somebody stopped, and we told them what happened, and it said Henry wasn't able to go any further. So this man who stopped for us took us, all of us, right up to where we got to the wedding. Ray, your grandmother, had gone up 3 days before to do baking and cooking. So she was worried to death because we didn't show up. And here was Henry, and I was there, and Florrie, and so on. So finally we got there, and there was less excitement, because it was September, and it was quite cool. But it was beautiful, real autumn day. So we got there after the excitement, and they had the wedding.